Shalom. I'm happy to be here. With this talk on self. A lot of self. Just in the title. A lot of self. You know what the title is?
You don't hear me.
Ah, you don't hear me? Okay. Now better? You hear me now? Okay, great. Now what I was saying is that today's topic, today's talk, is a lot about the I, a lot about the self. So self-cherishing or self-centeredness versus self-confidence. Okay. That's actually a central topic in Buddhism, the I, the self. And actually if you think about it, if it's all about self and I, that could be pretty dangerous in terms of focusing too much on I. We're really good at that. And then if we focus more on it in Buddhism, well, it seems there's some danger that our sense of self actually gets stronger. But, well, in terms of what I'd like to talk about today, is this idea of self-centeredness, of like selfishness, being egocentric. There's so many words. I mean, it's really important even in the West, because in the English language you have so many words for it. In German there's a word, it translates into English, it's self-addiction. So it's being self-obsessed, being selfish, egotistical. So that's considered to be negative. And I think that we recognize that, and in a lot of religions, in the Abrahamic faith, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, it's definitely recognized as something harmful. And in modern psychology, it's also recognized as harmful. Well, it depends. It depends. Well, first of all, using the word is not that helpful because it's just a matter of definition. Because I've come across writings that say being selfish is healthy. It's healthy to be selfish. But then when you read further, you realize they just use the word selfish slightly differently. They talk about self-care, self-preservation. They talk about self-confidence. That's not what I'm talking about here. So here the Tibetan word is self-cherishing. Kind of like, yeah, self, like being concerned, overly concerned with the self. And then the English version would be self-centeredness maybe, or egocentric, or selfish, etc. But most important is the definition, what it is said to refer to. And so the way it is defined, oftentimes defined or explained, is as a sense that I am more important and that my happiness is more important than everyone else. That you're also important, your happiness is important, but actually mine is more important. So in general. And the stronger this sense is, the less important your happiness becomes. Plus, it can take on extremes that are then called narcissism or psychopathy, like becoming a narcissist, becoming a psychopath. That would be the extreme version of these states of mind. But it's so difficult to recognize this type of mind, and it's so difficult to not confuse it with healthy types of awareness, such as self-care, self-confidence, high self-esteem, self-preservation. Those are very important states of mind. And if we confuse them, we're in trouble. So first of all, it's difficult to differentiate between them in terms of just explaining them, intellectually understanding the difference. But what is even harder is to differentiate them in terms of our own mind, like what is what? Because we're so good at having all of them at different times. At times we're selfish. At times we preserve ourselves. There's self-care. their self-confidence. And I'd like to throw in another mental state, which is humility. What's the Hebrew word for humility? Huh? Sniut. I think it's underrated and misunderstood. Humility. People kind of like humble people, but it's moved a little bit to the side. Like, you know, nowadays being assertive is seen as the opposite of humble. And when you look at like modern day movies, the star, the hero, though we love peace and we love, you know, a peaceful person, but the hero is like a warrior, shoots down all the terrorists, right? Slightly narcissistic. And that's kind of what we like. So, therefore, in a modern age, humility is no longer seen as a virtue and is very much misunderstood. Right? Another word I'm told is friar. A person who's humble is kind of a friar. But I think that's just misunderstanding, or sucker. So that's just misunderstanding really what humility means. Humility, self-confidence versus the self-centeredness that I'm talking about. Actually, well, as I said, it's difficult to discern between those different states of mind. And not only that, we have all of these different types of mind at different times. And recognizing them helps us to strike what is called a balance. In the Buddhist context, striking a balance, there's a different word for it. Finding a middle way. Finding a middle way between extremes. We're very good at living in extremes. As in, like, a lot of our states of mind, they've gone to an extreme. There is a non-extreme version of that state of mind, but because of our perception of the environment, of the things around us, how we perceive of ourselves, how we perceive of others, because of extreme and exaggerated views of the things around us, we respond with extreme states of mind, and one of them is self-centeredness. I mean, it kind of makes sense, it's slightly extreme, that I'm just a little bit more important than you are. Right? My self-centeredness tells me I'm a little bit more important than you are. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Actually, why? Why am I more important? And because you also feel that you are more important, so who's right, who's wrong? Right? I mean, we all have a certain degree of self-centeredness. And what a 8th century Buddhist master, great Indian master, has said, called Shantideva, he says it very blatantly. He says, the cause of all our suffering, of all our problems, is self-centeredness. What? Seems to be a little bit more to suffering, right? A little bit more to having problems, having doubts, etc. So, I'd like to say a little bit about self-centeredness in the sense, like, what does modern psychology tell us about self-centeredness? In terms of religion, the old religion, so psychology in terms of science of the mind or system that is concerned with the mind, well, psychology has taken over from the different religions, like in different religious systems. Self-centeredness has been recognized and seen as an obstacle to spiritual insight and to a closeness to the divine, if you want to kind of try to include all sorts of different religions. Well, yes, so it's been seen as an obstacle to the divine, an obstacle to spiritual growth. And also in many religions has been seen as a cause of a lot of trouble, like for instance in Buddhism. And different methods have been prescribed by the different religious systems to counteract that. Okay? But before we talk about methods to counteract this, etc., but well, maybe first to recognize the negative effects of being self-centered, of seeing myself as more important. Many of them I think we will recognize as problems we face a lot nowadays in the West, in the modern life, And so depending on the degree of self-centeredness, the stronger these problems. For instance, fear, anxiety. Okay, so the more self-centered we are, the more anxious we are, the more fear we experience. Loneliness. In fact, there's been some studies where it says that they actually affect each other. Loneliness affects self-centeredness, strengthens self-centeredness, and self-centeredness strengthens loneliness. So 2 states of mind, 2 problems we face nowadays. And please don't get me wrong when I say self-centeredness leads to loneliness and we feel lonely at times. I'm not saying, oh, you're all really, really selfish, tough luck. What I'm saying is we all have a certain degree of self-centeredness, and that certain degree, I'm not saying we're narcissist, you're a narcissist or a psychopath, but at certain times we all face a certain degree of self-centeredness. We're bound to have that. As normal human beings, it's just part of who we are. We have that state of mind. And that being the case, therefore, we experience certain emotions such as anxiety, loneliness, and so forth. It's harmful in terms of our relationships, like social relationships. The more self-centered we are, the harder our relationships. And if there are 2 people, both, of course, it's hard. We're hypersensitive to criticism, to any kind of, anything that threatens our self-image, so we're very sensitive. We're very narrow-minded, short-sighted. Narrow-minded and short-sighted. Right? It's like I, me. The stronger the self-centeredness, the stronger the narrow-mindedness, and also short-sighted, immediate gratification. We're not really, so long-term benefit versus short-term benefit, the stronger my self-centeredness, the stronger my sense, immediate gratification, and I give up long-term happiness for the sake of short-term happiness. And I'll say a little bit more about this because there's been some research on this. Okay. So, as Shantideva says, it's the cause of all our trouble, so I'm counting those. So what is this trouble? Loneliness, anxiety, worry. It gives rise to arrogance, for instance. It gives rise to a sense, my views are better than those of others. And that then leads to racism, homophobia, religious hatred, and any kind of discrimination. I'm right, they are wrong. Right? So different views. So basically, if you check in terms of, and I don't have the time and I don't want to bore you, any trouble goes back to that type of mind, that type of self-centeredness. And from a Buddhist point of view, not only do they mention self-centeredness, but they talk about other resultant emotional states that are harmful. Hatred, anger, attachment as in craving something and feeling I can't live without that. Jealousy, envy, arrogance, and so forth. So different states of mind. And they cause us so much trouble. Mainly us. And indirectly also others. Trouble, the one thing we don't want. The one thing we try to avoid. And then there's self-care, on the other hand. Humility. And self-confidence. And those are actually contradictory, but it's so easy to confuse them. So in the sense, self-care. Maybe I'll start with self-care. It's this idea when you're in a plane and the pilot tells you, in the unlikely event of what is it, falling cabin pressure, gas masks will fall down. And please put them on yourself before you help others. That seems really selfish. Right? Like, what? My children are all around. I'm going to help them first. But of course, it kind of makes sense if you kind of fall over because of the lack of oxygen, how many people are you going to help? Well, if you take care of yourself first to make sure you can breathe and you're okay, then you can take care of others. It actually makes perfect sense. So therefore you have self-care. We have to look after ourselves. So, and if you maybe remember in the course, in the description of this talk, I also mentioned, okay, so self-cherishing, self-centeredness, that is a problem. Cherishing others more than ourselves, that actually gives us happiness, that makes us happy. Okay, what? So then the thought that may arise is, why should I put others? That seems the other extreme. I put myself first, that's an extreme. I put others before myself, that seems to be an extreme. And that means I no longer take care of myself. And there are people like that who take care so much of others, they totally neglect themselves. So cherishing others, does that mean I have to neglect myself and put others first? It goes to such a degree, like often mothers, they feel guilty when they experience some joy or some happiness. They feel like I have to always be working, I have to always work for my kids. I cannot enjoy myself. Now that is not putting others before self. Not in the way the Buddha has explained it, not in the way Shantideva and so forth have explained it. That is like giving the mask, giving your own mask away, giving away your oxygen mask. That's not self-care. So basically self-care means also, if you want to make others happy, you have to be happy yourself. Very important. You have a personal responsibility to be happy. Actually, if you really feel you want to be responsible for others, it's important that you're happy, because an unhappy person, how are you going to make others happy? So without a certain degree of happiness and well-being and inner calm, how can you give this to others? So I guess you get already where we're going, what direction we're moving at. The idea that, okay, this extreme sense of I, this extreme exaggerated sense of me, as in the case of self-centeredness, that, okay, doesn't make sense. And of course the question we have to deal with is like, how do I deal with this? But okay, it's just about recognizing it first and also understanding its disadvantages. But then the next step is, well, how far do I need to look after myself? And where does humility come in? And where does self-confidence come in? Are humility and self-care contradictory? Is self-confidence and humility, are they contradictory? What is humility in the first place? And again, when you read some of the explanations, I don't know, I would agree, and I don't know whether the word humility is not used in a different way. So the way the Buddha, for instance, describes humility is a real sense of our own limitations. A real sense, an understanding of my own limitations and an acceptance of that. An acceptance of that. So it's insight into how much I can do, how much I cannot do, and an acceptance of that. Seeing my own limitations. And without self-confidence, you cannot truly be humble. Because I'm okay to have faults. I'm okay to not know. I'm okay to have limits. It's okay. So that's true self-confidence. And if you have true self-confidence, then it's very easy to be happy for others when they have something I don't have. When they're good at something, it's very easy to praise them and to appreciate them, right? Does that make sense? So this kind of humility, it's not about becoming a friar. It's not about being pushed around. It's not about becoming a doormat. It's not about being a victim, a martyr. What else? Putting yourself always in the back and never enjoying any happiness. It's not about that at all. it's not even about self-restraint. It's about self-confidence. Self-confidence and being comfortable with our limitations, being comfortable with what I can do and to be happy about what I can do, but also be accepting of what I cannot do. So you see how this attitude is realistic. That is realistic because we're all human. We have flaws and we have a lot of qualities, good qualities. So some people think, oh, humility means to be self-deprecating. But from a Buddhist point of view, that's a type of laziness. That's a negative state of mind. That's described as a negative state of mind. Negative in a sense, it gives us suffering. It causes us to suffer and it causes others to suffer. So you see, it's very kind of, there are a lot of fine line. The middle here becomes quite narrow. So, okay, too much self-centeredness leads to arrogance. Self-centeredness, I'm more important. My views are better. My happiness is more important. Therefore, I'm full of myself. Leads to arrogance. I'm better. You're lower. Arrogance. On one hand. On the other hand, self-deprecation. I'm nothing. I'm worthless. I'm stupid. It's another extreme. In one extreme, when you have arrogance, you focus mainly on, the positive qualities. When you're self-deprecating, you focus more on the negative qualities. And the funny thing is, it all comes from self-centeredness. Even the self-deprecating quality or self-deprecating kind of awareness, it comes from self-centeredness. That seems a little difficult. That part, the first part is easy, right? Arrogance comes from self-centeredness. Oh yeah, that's pretty obvious. But self-deprecation, so kind of putting yourself down and not liking yourself and self-hatred, all that also comes from self-centeredness. That's a little harder to understand. So trying to move towards the middle, humility, the word, the English word I use to say humility, so the way it's defined, according to Buddhist psychology, it is defined as kind of being in the middle in terms of the middle between arrogance and self-deprecation. An acceptance of my good qualities, feeling confident about those, feeling good about those, and feeling also being accepting of my negative qualities. Okay? So that is